10. This is Fox 61, Connecticut's news station.
And we begin tonight on the Weather Watch. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Jake Garcia for the news at 10 here. And let's show you some of the damage that we found as we responded to the storm today. First to Simsbury, where homeowners barely escaped having their house smashed by a tree that fell in their front yard. This was over on David Drive. And other fallen trees forced the closure of roads in Simsbury and several other towns, including in Lebanon tonight. So if you're headed out, be prepared for some potential detours, and not just trees, of course, but power lines and other cables got knocked down during the storm. Our colleague on the assignment desk, Fox 61's Joe Giacco, sent us these photos from Meriden. And if you didn't already know, fallen trees are the #1 cause of power outages in our state. And that was true in West Hartford today. Quite a mess in town that prides itself on its trees. Southbury's fire department shared these photos from their busy day responding to electrical fires caused by those fallen power lines. This first one burned up on Lower Fish Rock Road. Another was on Jacob Road as well. And ponding on Scarborough Street in Hartford had at least one driver hesitant to proceed until honking finally convinced them to get out of the way. Fortunately, as you can see, the water wasn't too deep and everyone eventually made it to Albany Avenue. And we found more than a few puddles across the capital city, which wasn't so bad for drivers, but if you're standing at a bus stop and got splashed, well, that's a different story. Well, check this out. At the height of the storm this afternoon, one Fox 61 viewer spotted a manhole cover that popped open. Apparently, there was so much storm water underground that it forced the cover out of the manhole. Thanks to Isaiah for sharing this video with us. And at one point today, over 16,000 customers were without power across the state. But here's the latest on the power outages here in Connecticut right now. 1,800 Eversource customers are still in the dark, mostly in Danbury. United Illuminating reports that it's restored power to all of its customers. You can get the latest updates on these numbers on the forecast page on our website, fox61.com. Well, those damaging storms we experienced today are finally over, thank goodness, Ryan. But what's in store for tomorrow?
Well, Jake, we've got big changes and we need a break. This was our 8th round of storm, or I should say our 4th round of storms in 8 days since going back to last Saturday. So we've had a lot of thunderstorms recently. Here's another shot from our weather watcher Kirk in Hebron. That part of the state was slammed, and flash flooding, just too much rain at once in Bristol. And we tallied up more than 2 inches of rain from Southington to Rocky Hill. That was the area that saw the most rain. New Haven only about a ½ an inch, but even in Groton we picked up more than 1.5 inches of rain. Storms now long gone. We're starting to drop the humidity, but we still have a couple of small showers to go right around Durham and North Guilford, a little shower going through there. It's still mild in most of the state, but look at Torrington down to 66. The dew point there has now dropped to 63. That's a sign of drier air, which will be sweeping through the rest of the state overnight tonight. So it will be much more comfortable by the time most of you wake up and head out the door tomorrow morning. Clearing out, less humid, low temperatures tonight in the low 60s for most of us, but some of the hill towns could drop to 59 or even 58. And then tomorrow, a nice looking day, a mix of sunshine and clouds, comfortable levels of humidity, a big change after the tropical levels of humidity we felt today, with high temperatures tomorrow generally between 75 and 80. It stays comfortable for a few days, but it looks like the humidity will come back in time for the 4th of July, and that will come with some heat too. We'll talk about how long it gets and whether or not that comes with any more storms when I see you again in about 10 minutes. Jake?
All right, Ryan, thank you. Whenever severe weather happens, you can count on Fox 61 and our Weather Watch team to keep you informed. Download the free Fox 61 app to track severe weather and get alerts when you need them most. And new tonight, we have pictures from a house fire in Moosip that sent black smoke and heavy flames into the sky. Take a look at these photos. They show what Jewett City firefighters faced on Cottage Street. Fortunately, no one was hurt. We're told the Red Cross is helping 6 people, 3 adults and 3 children who were displaced by that fire. Now take a look at the aftermath of that charred home. 14 members of the Jewett City Fire Department were helped by firefighters from neighboring towns. We're told that the resident's dog made it out safely with the family, but 2 cats are still missing tonight. And dozens of new laws go into effect starting tomorrow, July 1st, including a law governing speed cameras in construction zones and a law that expands background checks for gun buyers. Among the many laws recently signed by Governor Ned Lamont is one that governs the use of speed cameras. A number of Connecticut cities and towns have experimented with red light and speed cameras. Now, the Connecticut Department of Transportation Work Zone safety initiatives will be permanent, going into effect Monday. You may remember the Department of Transportation had been using speed cameras in various work zones across the state to cut down on the number of drivers who exceed the speed limit there.
The law allows us to have up to 10 locations active at one time, so more than the 3 that we were permitted during the pilot program. So it's just going to take us a little bit of time to get the program developed and up and running.
This effort drawing more attention to construction worker safety after the death of Connecticut DOT worker 26-year-old Andrew D. Domenico, who was struck and killed by a car in Wallingford last week. Josh Morgan says this effort made workers feel safer on the job.
So there is a huge change in driver behavior when these cameras were active in our work zones. And we're so appreciative to the legislature, to the governor for supporting the program, for getting this signed into the law, because the men and women who are out there feel safer. The work zones are safer, speeds are slower, and it's good news for everybody.
While this law goes into effect starting Monday, he said it could be months before cameras are in work zones across the state.
We still need to do a request for proposal, put a program together, so these cameras won't be on the street in our work zones until 2025.
Another law that goes into effect will expand background checks when it comes to buying guns. A bill passed by the General Assembly last session will allow gun retailers both in and outside of Connecticut to access juvenile arrest records when obtaining a gun or transferring a license both to and from Connecticut.
It really is something that's in keeping with what was recommended by federal legislation, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And that is in no way affect the sanctity or the privacy of minors' records, but makes it clear that if people have a violent past and are at risk of violence, that is known if they're applying to for a background check.
Now, these are just some of the new laws going into effect starting at midnight. You can find a complete list of all those laws on our website, fox61.com. And a woman arrested in the death of that DOT worker I just told you about is scheduled to appear in court tomorrow. Police arrested Denise Lucibello for hitting and killing 26-year-old Andrew Dio Demencio on I-91 South in Wallingford Friday morning. He was working construction on the Wharton Brook connector at exit 13. Police say Lucibello was driving under the influence.
If it feels like I'm bringing a sense of moral outrage this morning, I am. We're outraged with the speeding. We are outraged with people being digitally distracted, so digitally distracted that they can't determine what's going on and react. It's unacceptable.
Lucibello is being held on a $1 million bond. Count on Fox 61 to follow up tomorrow on what happens at her day in court. And now to the race for the White House. Following last week's historic presidential debate, President Biden's heavily criticized performance and his sometimes incoherent responses have led political analysts like James Carville and newspaper editors to call for him to end his campaign. The president and his family spent this weekend at Camp David as elected Democrats urge him to stay in the race.
I think he's the only Democrat who can beat Donald Trump. And let me tell you, we had the single best day of grassroots fundraising after the debate. The first poll that we saw after the debate showed Joe Biden gaining ground on Donald Trump.
That whole abandon Biden thing, that's the dumbest I've ever heard. I mean, if you are more inclined to vote for a Democrat or be a Democrat, if you're willing to walk away from Joe Biden, you're by defecting helping Trump.
That's ultimately what the debates really showed, is that we have two candidates, one who can't do the job, one who has failed to do the job, and that's Joe Biden, and Donald Trump, who both could do the job but has already done it successfully.
Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will decide whether former President Trump is immune from prosecution for his role in the January 6th Capitol riot, which will not only impact the race for the White House, but his upcoming federal criminal trial. Madeline Rivera reports from outside the Supreme Court.
There are at least 3 decisions that the Supreme Court has yet to release, but the case involving former President Trump's claim of presidential immunity is the most anticipated one. This stems from his D.C. election interference indictment. Last August, former President Trump was charged with 4 federal felony counts related to the allegations that he interfered with the 2020 election. Trump's lawyers argued Trump cannot be criminally charged for any official actions he took as president. Special counsel Jack Smith, meantime, says no person is above the law, including the President of the United States. In December, a federal judge refused to dismiss the charges against the former president. And in February, a U.S. appeals court unanimously rejected Trump's claims that he cannot be prosecuted. During arguments in April, the court appeared skeptical of embracing Trump's proclamation of absolute immunity, but some justices seemed open to granting some level of protection for former presidents. The proceedings, though, have diminished the possibility that Trump will stand trial on this case before the November election.
The expectation is they may come up with a nuanced view and send this back. Now, that's important because if they send it back, it may be for the trial court to determine what here was part of an official function. That will take time, and the clock is ticking.
The Supreme Court is also expected to hand a ruling on Monday, which could impact how social media platforms regulate the content posted by their users. In Washington, Mallory Rivera, Fox News.
And former Trump aide and conservative political analyst Steve Bannon has been ordered to report to the low-level federal security prison in Danbury tomorrow after the Supreme Court rejected his bid to stay free. Bannon was convicted of 2 counts of contempt of Congress nearly 2 years ago for ignoring a subpoena from the House January 6th committee. He was sentenced to 4 months behind bars.